Welcome back to Pitfalls and Bear Traps of Title 24, Part 6 Acceptance Testing for engineers, designers, architects, contractors, and commissioning agents. This is the 2013 code version, and we will need a new version of this starting January 1st, 2017. So do bear in mind that this is not under the 2016 code yet. This is in case you are going to submit a design to an authority having jurisdiction during the rest of the year 2016. According to Section 130.1 Charlie, shutoff controls must be installed to automatically shut off lighting, quote, all of the lighting when the space is typically unoccupied, unquote. At the end of this section, we're going to look at stairwells and corridors because there's some particularly nasty business about those. Shutoff controls means one of two types of equipments. They are either an automatic time switch or an occupancy sensing device. In some cases, occupancy sensing devices are mandatory. There are very few exceptions to the mandatory installation of shut-off controls. You can see that you're pretty much going to have to install them everywhere. You can find the information on timers in all the usual places. We find our minimum functional specifications to sell them at a hardware store in Section 1605.3 L2 of Title 20. We find the requirements to be mandatorily installed in the Building Energy Efficiency Standards, 130.1 Charlie, and we find the acceptance testing procedures for indoor timers in NA 7.6 of the reference appendices. Automatic time switches are an option for a shutoff control if occupancy sensors are not specified. They must have a maximum 2-hour override control installed in the area with the controlled lighting, if required by Section 130.1a area controls. The override is considered to be an area control under this code. In other words, it's got the same specs. Automatic time switches are an option for shutoff control if occupancy sensors are not specified. There are no code requirements for the mandatory installation of automatic time switches indoors. Minimum specifications for time of day and date type automatic time switches can be found in Title 20, as well as the specifications for astronomical time switches. They're also found in Title 20. If a computerized scheduler is used, if you're using scheduling software or some kind of a sophisticated scheduler, Section 110.9 has additional requirements under some circumstances. Surprise! Automatic time switches must be programmed prior to the arrival of an acceptance test technician. If the timer is an astronomical time switch, it must be told where it is located on planet Earth so that it can predict sunrise and sunset. Here is where the acceptance test technician is required to, quote, demonstrate and document, unquote, the programming for the building owner on acceptance testing form NRCA for acceptance -LTI for indoor -02 -A for acceptance. Some occupancy sensor types are mandatory under the code in some areas. All the information about occupancy sensors is found in the usual locations in the 4 code manuals that we looked at in Pitfalls Section 1. There is no "thou shalt install a partial on occupancy sensing device" command in the code. This is the 2013 code. Please remember that. You can earn a PAF for partial on under the 2013 code. 2016 is different. Partial on occupancy sensing controls are never mandatory under the current code. This is until January 1st, 2017. They can be used to earn a PAF until January 1st, 2017 for all non-residential, for all non-residential function areas, vacancy sensors are also not mandatory under the current code. Right? However, occupancy sensors in general are required in certain areas. If you are installing controlled receptacles under 130.5D of the current code, then offices under 250 square feet and conference rooms require the receptacles to be controlled by occupancy sensors. Okay, this is under the current code. This is changing for 2016. But if you're putting in those switch receptacles and you're in an office under 250 square feet or a conference room of any size, those must be on OCC sensors. The rest of them can be on timers if you wish. Areas under 130.1 Charlie 6 require 2 shutoff controls, and under 130.1 Charlie 7, some lighting must remain on. So what if I have a corridor or a stairwell that falls under 130.1 Charlie 6, where I have a partial off occupancy sensor or sensing system in addition to other shutoff controls? Well, one of the places that is not excluded from this is stairwells or corridors not serving hotel, motel, guest rooms, or dwelling units. So you're going to require 2 shutoff controls and an area control. And they want the area control in the area, believe it or not. And you're probably going to require multi-level controls if you're using any kind of dimmable luminaire in there. Separate controls for each floor of the building, which doesn't really make sense because it's a stairwell and it goes between floors. And you're also going to need a timer override if you're using an automatic time switch for, say, the lower tier of the lighting. You might want to do that. For instance, slightly before and after working hours, you would have an automatic time switch turn on the lower tier of lighting in stairwells and corridors, and then when anybody enters the stairwell or corridor, the rest of the lighting comes on. A little hint, you're going to want to leave that automatic occupancy sensing system running 24/7, because if somebody enters one of these areas and the timer has shut off the lower tier of illumination, then it'll be unsafe if you don't have some lighting coming auto on. Anyway, this is probably not what you want. You didn't want to put a light switch in a non-residential stairwell. The good news is that you can use 2 occupancy sensors to comply with this if you feel like it, which is a little strange, but you will still be required to have an area control to allow you to turn off all the lighting in the area regardless of occupancy status. So that's nuts. Even Section 110.9 says you can build a system, an occupancy sensing system out of separate occupancy sensors. You go ahead and look in 110.9 if you feel like it. Acceptance test technicians don't check all these design criteria. Okay, this is better news. They'll test the function of shutoff components. They'll make sure there are 2 installed in one of these stairways or corridors. They'll test any automatic time switch used for function, programming, and override operation. But they don't have a checklist to show that you have manual dimming operation for dimmable luminaires in these areas, and they don't have a check off on the form for is the area control in the area with the controlled lighting. However, they do have it for timer override, so watch that. Note that controls for areas complying with section 130.1 Charlie 6 are treated differently in the final pass-fail. So you must have 2 shut-off controls if you are in an area stipulated under 130.1 Charlie 6. Here is the functional check for part-off sensing for areas under 130.1 Charlie 7. This is it. Under 130.1 Charlie 7, you're looking at indoor parking areas, stairwells serving hotel, motel, guest rooms, and residences, and other places where loading and unloading areas. These are places where it would be outright unsafe to have all of the lighting shut off at any time. So under 130.1 Charlie 7, the tech just checks the shut-off control for the part-off function, and that's it. For areas under 130.1 Charlie 6, the second shut-off device for the area has to be tested as well for the final pass-fail. Also note that currently area controls are required to be placed in the area of parking areas in a parking structure. Seriously, if you look at the code, you've got to have an on-off switch in the parking area of a parking structure. Thankfully, the types of non-residential building occupancies and function areas accepted from having the area control in that area is being expanded to allow area and multi-level controls to be moved out of the areas with the controlled lighting. So during the next bit of code, we're going to be removing them from stairwells at a minimum. So take a look at the 2016 code as well as the 2013 code so that you have some idea of what's coming up in the future. It's getting better. Multi-level control will no longer be required in areas under 130.1 Charlie 6 and 7, such as stairwells. And separate controls per floor will no longer be required in stairwells because, what did that mean anyway? That's just strange. Remember, as this material is being prepared, you are still suffering under the 2013 Building Energy Efficiency Standards, but pay attention to what field technicians have to inspect for acceptance testing. Can you still put HIDs in warehouses? You know what? They don't dim. So under current, they don't dim very well. Probably not more than 40 to 60%. So if you've got to have a part-off occupancy sensor in a warehouse areas, which you do, if there's skylights, you're probably going to require daylighting as well, which requires typically dimming with HIDs, or at least dimming one of them and shutting the other one off. And if you've got demand response, then you have to reduce the lighting in there as well. So under current code, the 2013 Title 24 Part 6, you probably can't put HIDs in warehouses. I'm serious about that, not if they have skylights, okay? Here's some evidence of the current off the current acceptance testing form, NRCA LTI 03-A, that shows the alleged limited dimming qualities of HID luminaires. If you look right here, you'll see that they are showing that they're only going to get about 40% dimming. So it's going to be particularly difficult to layer all of this multi-level control on with HIDs in a warehouse. So why don't you join me for Pitfalls 05, where we talk about demand response under the current code, because this has got big changes coming for 2016. big changes, and also examine some of the undefined terms that they have in the acceptance testing and, in fact, in the design criteria, because undefined terms are just murder when you're trying to puzzle out this code. Thank you for your time and patience.